For too long, the galaxy has been torn apart by war. Since the birth of galactic travel and the rise of the Republic era, after era has been dominated by conflict. Jedi, Sith, Mandalorians, each taking its toll and blood from the galaxy. But finally, peace. The Jedi have, as it seems, finally vanquished the Sith. 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Battle of Ruusan has come to an end. The Sith Brotherhood of Darkness has been destroyed, and the Sith seemingly with it. The Republic has asserted its dominance as the final order of governance to outlast the many threats that have assailed it since its inception, and now at long last, peace. Sure, there will always be conflict. Piracy on the lawless fringes, crime cartels, and unstable intraplanetary disruption. But the era of mass galactic war has finally come to an end, at least for now. This great peace of the Republic will last 1,000 years, an era of prosperity, corruption, and intrigue. But as all things, it won't and it can't last forever.
You are listening to the Star Lords Podcast.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Tashi Station to pick up some power converters.
A Phantom Menace. The Sith weren't really eradicated at Ruusan. The galaxy, the Jedi, the Republic thought their age-old enemies had finally been annihilated, but they could not be more wrong. Now forced into hiding, Darth Bane, the last Sith, has taken a protege, Darth Zana, on whom he would impart his new, and in some ways older, Sith doctrine. No longer would the Sith try to dominate by numbers, or share power amongst councils and weaken their power by sharing amongst Brotherhood. No, the Sith would now live by a new edict, the rule of two. One Sith Lord to embody the power, the teachings, and the dark side of the Force, and their apprentice to crave it, to study it, and one day overcome their master in power and strength, or die in the attempt. Despite their building of power, the Sith would have to remain secret, for their enemies, the Jedi and the Republic, outnumbered them by the millions. The Sith would have to adapt, to find a new way to destroy the Republic. As a caustic force from within, a rot that would bide its time, manipulate the galaxy from the shadows, and only when ready, when at its zenith, strike in deadly blow to destroy all their foes in one powerful move. This would be the grand plan. Each of these new Sith Lords would be granted the title of Darth, and would often adopt a dual identity, which allowed them to operate in both worlds. Inheriting the role of Sith Lord, Zana would adopt Darth Cognis as her apprentice, and so the dominoes of the great chain of this new Sith legacy would continue. The system, however, was not without its anomalies, its heretics. Darth Millennial and Darth Gravid are two such Sith Lords who attempted to abandon the ideal of Bane's new order, but were either exiled or destroyed for their efforts, as the system self-corrected. Millennial would found Sith splinter group, the Prophets of the Dark Side, on Drummond Cass, who, hundreds of years later, would be readopted by Darth Sidious to further his own aims. For those that held true to Bane's order, their alter egos would ingratiate themselves within the systems of the Republic to begin acquiring wealth, power, and prestige to advance the grand plan. Becoming bankers, politicians, and engineers all the while, advancing their dark ambitions. A reformed republic.
What will come to be known as the Dark Age of the Republic has ended, and a new age is dawning. An age of peace and stability. While the seeds of ruin are being planted by the Sith in shadows that will take hundreds of years to bear fruit, the new Chancellor, Tarsis Valorum, would enact the Ruusan Reformation, unraveling the Republic's central authority, dissolving its standing armies, and reshaping millions of sectors into 1,024 regional blocks, each granted a solitary voice in the Senate. In 490 BBY, the Corporate Sector Authority was founded, an unprecedented free enterprise fiefdom designed to separate the Senate from the ever-growing influence of corporate interests. Commerce once again rivaled worlds and species as a force shaping galactic politics. The core worlds were not immune to unrest. From 470 BBY, Corellia attempted to withdraw from the Republic, invoking the Contemplanes Hermi clause of the first time in history. The effort failed, as did a subsequent alliance between Corellia, Salonia, and Dral to seize control of the Federation of the Double Worlds. Earlier still, in 312 BBY, Berethron E. Solo had reshaped Corellia's governance, replacing absolute monarchy with a democratic constitutional monarchy. Beyond the core, the Republic expanded steadily. Worlds such as Mercure were discovered and settled, while exploration and colonization pushed into the rim with the contact of new species and new worlds joining the Republic. The following centuries saw aggressive outward growth. Human settlers from Salish colonized Veronat in 250 BBY, founding Tropus on Veronat and Edgefields on Veronat. Worlds such as Gelagalar, Adaralon, Glova, and Coveway followed, while Adaralon became home to Alderaanian colonists. In 232 BBY, the long-lost Kolaran system was rediscovered by Radi Artom, and in 195 BBY, Glova was colonized. The Republic's borders continued to swell. Vortex joined in 189 BBY, followed by Bakura, colonized in 150 under the Bakur Mining Corporation. That same year, corporate interests on Corellia overthrew the ruling constitutional monarchy, installing the office of the Dictat. In 124 BBY, the Senate passed two pivotal and deeply consequential laws. The Outer Rim territories were declared a tax-exempt free trade zone, while representation in the Senate was extended to guilds and corporations as functional constituencies. Orchestrated in part through the Treaty of Tramis, negotiated by Jedi Master Omo Bari, these measures would quietly entrench corporate power within the Republic itself. Cultural unity was also pursued. The Galactic Games were instituted in 83 BBY, even as contact was established with new worlds and species, Serea, Baturine, and the Aqualish colonies of Andosha too. Yet the frontier was restless. Criminal colonization projects such as Longwind, scientific outposts like Danur, and volatile regions like the Kothal Rift reflected a republic expanding faster than it could govern. In 867 BBY, the serene world of Naboo joined the Republic, an idyllic planet whose future importance went largely unnoticed. Tensions between Naboo's human settlers and indigenous Gungans erupted into armed conflict, ending only in 121 BBY. In 82 BBY, Sheev Palpatine, future senator and later Supreme Chancellor, was born. Political influence on Naboo deepened under corporate patronage. In 65 BBY, Bon Tapalo was elected monarch, with the backing from Intergalactic Banking Clan and Damask Holdings. His successor, Ars Veruna, would ascend to the throne in 46 BBY. The Republic Senate took notice of Naboo only gradually. In 52 BBY, Senator Vidar Kim was assassinated on Coruscant. His successor, Palpatine, was elected senator of Naboo and the Chomel sector, advised soon after by the controversial Jedi, Joruus C'baoth. In 46 BBY, Padme Nibiru was born on Naboo, the same year as Ars Varuna took the throne. In 57, the Yankori joined the Republic, and in 50, the model sector was admitted. New species were encountered, and commerce continued to flourish. Then came disasters and portents. The mysterious loss of the Katana fleet, one of many grandiose projects of the Republic, became a total fiasco, and in 45 BBY, the election of Finis Valorum as Supreme Chancellor for his first term.
The Jedi Order. In the centuries following the Ruusan Reformation, the Jedi Order stood as the Republic's quiet custodians, guided not by armies but by the will of the Force. At the beginning of this era, the Order was led by Grand Master Faye Coven, whose tenure marked both the height of the Jedi influence and the beginning of subtle, unsettling changes. In 896 BBY, Grand Master Faye Coven passed into the Force. In the same year, a child was born whose presence would come to define the Order for centuries to follow: Yoda. The child was later discovered and trained by Hyssarian Jedi Master Nkata del Gormo on a remote swamp world far from the political centers of the Republic. By 796 BBY, Yoda had risen to the rank of Jedi Master, signaling the emergence of a new philosophical anchor for the Order, one rooted in patience, restraint, and deep communion with the Force. The Order continued to expand its reach and traditions. In 509 BBY, Yaddle was born, another of Yoda's long-lived species, whose future would intertwine with the Council. Around 500 BBY, the Jedi commissioned the great training vessel Chu-Unthor, constructed in orbit over Abhian by Republic fleet systems. The ship became a wandering academy, carrying generations of initiates across the stars. Disaster struck in 340 BBY when the Chu-Unthor crashed upon the surface of Dathomir. Though the Order endured, the loss of the vessel and the knowledge it carried was keenly felt, and Dathomir would long remain a world of unease within Jedi records. Circa 200 BBY, the Jedi began to sense a troubling truth. The dark side of the Force was growing stronger. Its influence was subtle, manifesting not in open war but in doubt, ambition, and ideological fracture. In 188, the Jedi Kib Jin fell to the dark side, igniting what became known as the Dark Jedi conflict. That same year, the Almas Academy was founded to train and safeguard future generations. The conflict endured until 181, ending only with the death of Kib Jin. Though the threat was extinguished, the Order emerged chastened, aware now that darkness could arise from within as readily as from without. Around 130 BBY, a controversial philosophy known as the potentium began circulating among younger Jedi. Its adherents argued that the Force itself was neutral, and that only intent, not emotion, defied darkness. This doctrine was ultimately discredited, but its influence lingered. In 89 BBY, followers of the potentium had withdrawn from the Order, settling on Zonama Sekat. In the same period, Lorian Nod was expelled from the Jedi Order, another sign of tightening orthodoxy, as the Council sought unity over experimentation. A remarkable generation of Jedi was born in the decades that followed. In 102 BBY, Count Dooku was born into an aristocratic family on Sereno. Discovered by the Jedi, he began his training in infancy and was apprenticed in 89 BBY to Jedi Master Thame Cerulean. In 92 BBY, Qui-Gon Jinn was born and similarly brought into the Order as an infant. In 88, the enigmatic Dark Woman delivered Ki Adi Mundi to Coruscant for training. Dooku passed the Jedi trials in 82 BBY, becoming a Jedi Knight. That same year, Yoda took Ki Adi Mundi as his Padawan, shaping yet another future leader of the Order. By the year 72, Mace Windu was born on Harun Kal, destined to become one of the Order's most formidable champions. By 66 BBY, Dooku and Qui-Gon Jinn embarked on their final mission as Master and Padawan, their paths soon to diverge in philosophy and fate. The closing decades of the era carried both promises and losses. In 51 BBY, the Dark Woman brought Aurra Singh to Coruscant for Jedi training, a decision whose consequences would echo far beyond the temple. In the year 44, the Jedi Master Tivolka was killed by Trade Federation droids, a reminder that galactic tensions were sharpening. That same year, Plo Koon was elevated to the Jedi Council, joining those tasked with guiding the Order through an increasingly uncertain future. The Jedi remained vigilant, confident in their traditions, yet unaware that the greatest trial was already moving unseen, concealed by patience, secrecy, and the dark side itself. Across the galaxy.
While the halls of galactic power appeared to stabilize, history unfolded along less illuminated paths. In the lawless reaches beyond Senate jurisdiction, among criminal syndicates, frontier worlds, and ancient warrior cultures, forces gathered that would one day reshape the fate of the galaxy as surely as any chancellor or council decree. By 600 BBY, Zorba Dasilagic Tiur had risen to command the Dasilagic Kajidik, consolidating Hutt influence across vast stretches of space beyond Republic law. In the same era, the Jedi Knight Aleia was exiled to Dathomir, where she would lay the foundations of what would become the Witches of Dathomir, a Force tradition shaped by isolation, resentment, and survival. It was also during this period that Jabba Dasilagic Tiur was born on Nal Hutta, heir to the criminal dynasty that would one day dominate the Outer Rim's black markets and smuggling lanes. Far from Hutt intrigue, in 200 BBY, a Wookiee child named Chewbacca was born on Kashyyyk, destined for a life that would shape the galaxy beyond any senator or Jedi.
The desert world of Tatooine entered galactic awareness through accident and suffering. In 700 BBY, the ascetic Boamar monks arrived, retreating inward to contemplate the cosmos, undisturbed by the galaxy, and building a monastery in the desert. By the year 550, the bandit Al-Khara seized a stone fortress that would one day become Jabba's palace. His brutal slaughter of a Tusken raider tribe ignited a blood feud between humans and Sand People that would endure for centuries. In 516 BBY, Jabba Dasilagic Tiur drove Al-Khara from the palace, marking the Hutt's growing interest in the world. True colonization began around 100 BBY, when Starship Dowager Queen crashed on Tatooine. Survivors found Fort Tusken, followed shortly by Bestine Settlement in 99 BBY. From the years 98 to 95, Sand People assaults devastated Fort Tusken, forcing its abandonment. Yet settlers returned. In 93 BBY, new colonists found Motesta and rebuilt Anchorhead. Mos Eisley arose in the year 85, around the wreckage of the Dowager Queen, followed by Mos Espa in 83 BBY. Ports that would become synonymous with smugglers, slaves, scum, and villainy. The Skywalker lineage arose quietly amid this hardship. Shmi Skywalker was born in 72 BBY, and in the year 66, Shmi was sold into slavery, her fate bound to Tatooine's cruelty. By 65, the Hutts formally seized control of Tatooine, recognizing its strategic value as a transfer point between the Corellian Run and the trailless trade route. Beneath Hutt rule, the world became a crossroads of crime. In 41 BBY, Anakin Skywalker was born to the enslaved Shmi, the child who would one day be known as the Chosen One, though the galaxy remained ignorant of the moment's significance.
In other distant parts of the galaxy, at the dawn of the Great Peace, the Chiss ascendancy reached the height of its territorial expansion, deep within the unknown regions. Isolationist by design, the Chiss remained distant observers of galactic affairs, their power carefully concealed. Elsewhere, the Rakata, once rulers of a fear-driven empire that predated the Republic itself, finally vanished. Their civilization, already reduced to myth and ruin, passed into extinction, leaving behind relics, warnings, and only echoes in the Force.
On Mandalore, peace proved fleeting. In 738 BBY, the Mandalorian excision was carried out after Mandalore refused to submit to the Republic in the wake of the Ruusan reformations. Though the world endured, resentment hardened against their historic enemies. In 132 BBY, a Mandalore was assassinated by the bounty hunter Dirge, aided by rogue Jedi Knights, an act that deepened the Mandalorian hatred of the Jedi Order. War followed. In the year 60, the Mandalorian Civil War erupted, elevating Jaster Meriel as Mandalore. And by the year 44, the conflict fractured into the Great Clan Wars, leaving Mandalore weakened and divided. That same year, the Mandalorians met near annihilation at the Battle of Galadran, where a Jedi task force led by Count Dooku shattered their forces. Only a single Mandalorian survived the encounter, Jango Fett, whose legacy would ripple far beyond Mandalore's ruins.
Amid this era, unseen networks grew. Around 300 BBY, the Bothan spy net was established, weaving information into a weapon more subtle than fleets and whose use would prove instrumental hundreds of years into the future. At the same time, the Hoak-Weequay conflicts began, reminding the galaxy that ancient grudges could endure as stubbornly as any empire. Thus, while the Republic congratulated itself on peace and reform, the Outer Rim was left to fend for itself. Crime, slavery, and piracy still existed, and some worlds remained locked in conflict.
Crisis, conflicts, chaos. Though free from the galaxy-spanning warfare that had dominated much of Republic history, the Great Peace was also not without its crisis and tumult. Even proving itself resourceful and resolute, the power of the Republic began to wane over the 1,000-year peace. Corruption flourished and resentments built that would again erupt into galaxy-spanning wars. With an increase in conflicts and chaos as the age marched towards its own ending. This slow decline was maximized by bad actors, working within the Republic itself, would expedite the erosion of peace and good governance to their own ends. As the years counted down, the illusion of stability grew thinner with every passing decade. In 294 BBY, the Nojor-Weogar War erupted between rival Bith city-states on Clakdor 7. The conflict devastated the planet's cultural and scientific centers, yet drew little attention beyond the system, a pattern that would repeat with regularity. The galaxy itself proved hostile. In 232 BBY, the world of Workser was annihilated when its sun went supernova, erasing the planet completely. Earlier still, in 200 BBY, the star Carosi entered a catastrophic phase of rapid expansion. Over centuries, it consumed its inner worlds, including Carosi 4, the homeworld of the Carosites. The destruction unfolded slowly enough to be studied, yet too vast to be prevented. A reminder of how powerless even the Republic was before natural and cosmic forces. In the year 190, the native population of Fear was extinguished by plague. In 142, Brathkella descended into a severe ice age 2 years later, triggering mass displacement of its indigenous population, who took to the stars to escape the cataclysm. There was no war, no enemy to condemn, only the stillness and quiet of death. By 161 BBY, unrest reached even the Republic's frontier holdings, as a Terrassan revolt broke out on Kularin, exposing the fragility of distant governance and the limits of Senate authority. Planetary conflicts multiplied. In 142 BBY, Belasco entered into war with a neighboring world, and in 118 BBY, war between Garros IV and Sundari ended. But this peace would not last.
Around 200 BBY, Euperio Baobab developed Bab Prime, the linguistic framework that would evolve into modern droid speak. Following a devastating personality virus unleashed by a member of the Baobab merchant fleet, routine memory wipes became standard practice for droids, an institutional admission that the Republic no longer fully trusted the minds of its own machines. In 112 BBY, Cybot Galactica began production of the 3PO series protocol droids, heralding an age in which diplomacy, translation, and even etiquette were increasingly used as tools for expansion. One such unit, C-3PO, was constructed on Affa, and would later find his components on Tatooine, where he would be reassembled by a young slave boy. The cost of this reliance became evident in 97 BBY, when a droid uprising on Bakura forced the Republic to confront the danger of the machine. In 96, the Shrif Tut seized control of the C-Ruvi Imperium on Luwek, ending years of internal struggle with authoritarian consolidation. That same year, Danur was colonized by scientists drawn to the mysteries of the Cathal Rift, emblematic of the galaxy pushing outward even as it destabilized inward. In 94, Telos IV suffered a devastating famine, while the 21st Battle of Zavea raged on, Melida Dan, a stark indicator of how protracted and normalized warfare was starting to become. By 87 BBY, war reignited between Garros IV and Sundari, sparked by the destruction of a single grain processing facility, proof that earlier treaties had resolved nothing. In 74, the last civil war on Masterhome ended, its violence ritualized into a harmless tradition, yet a cultural scar left behind by generations of bloodshed. As secular authority faltered, belief systems surged. In 61, followers of the Hakigi religion, fleeing persecution, settled in Rishi. A year later, in 60, a massive wave of Hakig refugees from Garland arrived, overwhelming the planet's lowlands and disregarding the native Rishi. What began as a sanctuary quickly became tension. In 57, the Andoan Wars erupted, another regional conflict that would drag on, largely ignored by the core, even as it consumed lives and resources. By 44, the facade of peace could no longer be maintained. The Stark Hyperspace War tore open critical trade routes, while unrest flared on Kal Huro, signaling that even key systems were no longer immune to instability. The Republic still stood, the Senate still convened, and the Jedi still spoke of balance. Yet everywhere, on the frontier and in the core alike, the signs were unmistakable. The galaxy was now drifting towards crisis. Naboo would find itself at the center of galactic politics, as a trade federation launched an occupational blockade of the world, held hostage over taxation disputes, and a Senate no longer willing to act or intercede, mired in endless debate, bureaucracy, even after the attempted assassination of 2 Jedi ambassadors sent to resolve the dispute.
End of an era. Though the Great Peace of the Republic would formally end in 22 BBY with the outbreak of the Clone Wars, its unraveling began decades earlier. By circa 45 BBY, escalating tensions and regional conflicts were already signaling the approaching end of the era. Increased Jedi activity and intervention would be sought to settle conflicts and act as ambassadors and peacekeepers on behalf of the Republic. A Jedi Council that was beginning to have its own judgments clouded. Finis Valorum would be elected to a second term, but continue to deal with the inheritance of an increasingly despondent and corrupt Republic, with the growing shadow of the dark side encroaching as another era, one reminiscent of the great galactic wars of the past, was about to begin.
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Do you or someone you know suffer from force sensitivity? Diabetes can come from an elevated metachlorine count in your bloodstream. Talk to a doctor today and get tested. 1 out of 100 sentients report an elevated risk of diabetes. Some species are more likely to develop early onset force sensitivity. Together, we can beat diabetes. A message from the Inquisition in partnership with the Imperial Health Authority. Welcome aboard the Millennial Falcon. This is Christian.
And this is Jordan.
We are still deep within the hollowed halls of the records of the Great Library on Coruscant, just getting caught up on our histories before we take off on other adventures in the near future.
Absolutely. But before we go any further, I just want to remind everyone, if you're not yet a Patreon member, make sure to go do that. Patreon.com/StarLords. And for $3 a month, you can become a supporting member, get access to all the bonus episodes and whatnot. We also take support via PayPal or Bitcoin. All that information will be in the description of the show.
Hyperdrive fuel is not getting any cheaper these days.
Absolutely. And if you can't support monetarily, not a problem. We do love the help for the ratings and reviews. So if you want to drop a rating and review, that is a big help to us as well. If you guys want to reach out, make sure to send us a message. We are on Facebook, Instagram, X, Discord, and you can also email us at starlordspodcast@gmail.com, and you can find us there. Other than that, make sure to just reach out to us. Let us hear what you think about an episode, maybe a past episode. I do want a little PSA. If you are referring to a past episode, I do get sometimes emails and comments, and they're talking about a conversation we had like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I do not remember this. So just make sure, try to include as much of the context of what we were saying as you can if you want to bring up a comment about something, just so we know where we're coming from there. But other than that, I want to thank everyone again for the support. Thanks for listening to the show all these years, and we hope to keep doing it. And back to you, Christian.
Yeah, so we're talking about the Pax Republica, the great era of peace that precedes Episode 1 of the Star Wars prequel trilogy. This is kind of where things start to get set up and the galaxy starts to take more of a shape that you would recognize from the films. A lot of the content we talked about, the Old Republic, has been like really ancient stuff, characters and names of long dead people, but now you're starting to hear names pop up that like, oh yeah, I saw them in the movie, or yeah, they're members of the Jedi Council, or so on and so forth. So we're coming up on that era now. That isn't to say we're not going to go back again. There's still lots of content in the Old Republic that we haven't yet covered, what we will in the future. But this is kind of like a brief overview of this era leading up to the, like I said, episode 1. Overall, I will say it is a relatively underexplored era, especially in Star Wars Legends continuity. There isn't a lot in terms of like deep content. A lot of this stuff is either surface level or like mentioned in passing in other works later in the future. They'll mention this event happened or this planet got destroyed at a random date, but it's not really like talked about in its own material. There are a couple of books. I won't say there's no content. Of course, you do have like books like Darth Plagueis's book. And then you also have like a lot of early Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon adventure type works. But those are really towards the tail end of this great era of peace. You got to keep in mind this whole era covers 1,000 years, which is still quite a significant chunk of time. Mm-hmm. But it is a peaceful era, an era of relative stability. And all that is brought on by a strong and stable republic coming out of the Sith War.
Yeah, it's always like the end of a war that does it, eh?
Almost like you need war to find peace. But what am I, a political scientist?
Yeah, it is interesting. The other, we're talking about the Pax Republica, and there's obviously Pax Romana, Pax Britannica, Pax Americana.
Yeah, there's actually quite a few Pax eras. The term comes from real life. I think most well-known would either be the Pax Romana or Pax Americana, which define like an era of, again, relative peace, stability, prosperity, often referred to as like a golden age for civilization. Obviously, the Pax Romana being for the Roman Empire, Pax Americana being the last little part of our history, I think arguably just after World War II.
Yeah, so it's often, FDR literally called it the New World Order.
Yeah.
And then that term became abused. And now they call it the rules-based global order. Yeah. They sort of did a little rebrand there.
A rebrand? I wonder why. And arguably that era, some would say, might be coming to an end.
Absolutely. I would say the era of like 1945... really up till now, but you could even say,
a lot of this stuff is more easily defined in the future.
Yeah. Like 1945 up till now is obviously like, there was no world wars. There were conflicts, terrible, brutal conflicts, but they were much smaller in scale. And the amount of prosperity that we've seen in less than 100 years is probably unlike anything that we'd seen in any other 100-year period. I don't think that anything even quite comes close.
Yeah, technological advancement.
Yeah.
Economic advancement, relative peace. There was a whole talk, I remember when I was in school, about how there's been this huge era of peace of interstate violence. There weren't a lot of countries going to war with each other compared to the past. But intrastate violence did continue. So you had more things lended towards more civil wars and internal conflict to a country rather than country versus country, which kind of defined so much of global history up until recently.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's probably more so true in the post-Soviet era. Obviously we had like the fall of the former Yugoslavia,
like the 1990s or 2000s.
Yeah, like the Rwanda Civil War, the Sudanese Civil War later after that. A bunch of conflicts that were awful, but they weren't international wars.
They were internal to the country. And you see that kind of reflected in Star Wars as well, where, yes, this is a great piece of the Republic, being that there aren't these big intergalactic wars where you have multiple planetary battlefields. Really, it's like flare-ups of a planet fighting itself or a planet fighting a neighbor, but nothing as devastating as what had come in the past or what will reignite with the Clone Wars after. Kind of keeping on this term of Pax whatever, there's actually a huge list of Paxes that people have put forward. They have Pax Sovietica, can guess. It's a Soviet piece, Pax Europaea, Pax Assyriaca, which is the Assyrian Empire.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You even have Pax Mafiosa, which is a Pax Narcotica, which is like the great mafia piece.
Okay.
The common theme being through all of these is that oftentimes like a strong imperial unipolar world is relatively peaceful because there's no one to challenge them and their authority, right? They kind of...
They can exercise their power more at will than basically anyone else can.
Exactly.
It is interesting. You see, okay, so like Pax Britannica was sort of the end of the Napoleonic Wars up until, I don't know, World War One.
Yeah, I think some people would give it even to World War II, but World War One is where those dominoes really started to Britain.
Excuse me, but like Napoleon basically, like many idiots throughout history, marches into Russia in the winter and loses, and then that was kind of it for the French, and then the British were able to like fill that vacuum and become the dominant power, right? The superpower. Similarly, like Britain kind of has been falling. Their empire has more or less dissolved. I guess it still symbolically exists in the Commonwealth of Nations, but most of the participants in the Commonwealth of Nations, like, it's more just tradition as opposed to
direct rule.
Yeah, any kind of actual sovereignty exercised over those countries. But yeah, it sort of ends with a war, or it starts with the end of a war and it ends with another beginning of another war. It kind of seems like
or era of conflict.
Yeah, and not like little wars. We're talking like very large, significant
World
wars.
War level events. Yeah, which again you're about to see paralleled in Star Wars with the dawning of the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm curious, just going into our own common era. I wonder, like, do you think Pax Americana is over?
I think it's going to be hard to say, and we'll only be able to really define it in hindsight. I think it is declining, is my feeling. But it's kind of hard to see it when you're in it, right? It's kind of after the fact. You have to make that assertion. I mean,
it's hard to tell. Was like the invasion of Iraq the end of it? But even the Middle Eastern wars, as hard as they were and expensive, and a lot of people did die, relative to other wars, even Vietnam, they weren't that bad.
As bad. Yeah. I think there's a whole bunch of other factors at play, and it's not just warfare, although warfare seems to be kind of the defining points.
Yeah.
I think economy is a big part of it too. How long can you kick the infinite debt bubble down the road before it totally consumes you? I think America still has quite a few years in it still. And also that also is dependent on other factors and other things outside of its control, like the rise and or fall of China or Russia or other competing states. If they suddenly have a big renaissance or a big power vacuum or they collapse, by default, America would still remain the global hegemon. That being said, I think it's still on a downward trajectory overall. And these things can take, in my view, can take hundreds of years, or they can take decades, or they can, unlikely, but it could even happen overnight if you have some great big tumult or like a civil war kickoff.
Yeah.
Not that I think that's likely, but I would argue that we're probably on the declining side. I think the Pax Americana has reached its zenith, its high point, its golden era.
Yeah.
And, you might be entering a silver era or a bronze era, which isn't bad, but it's a decline from what it was and what it might be in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's rare that you see a fantastic collapse like that is fast, like in the case of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, or Assyria.
Yeah.
Was like almost an overnight thing, which is super rare in history, but it can happen.
Yeah, it can happen, but it's pretty rare. But yeah, I couldn't imagine like the nation that is like the world's reserve currency collapsing overnight.
It would definitely be like an apocalyptic event.
Yeah, it would have to be like something so extraordinary that would have to happen in order, like, but I mean, you could, because those empires who do like control the most in demand currency, they tend to spend a lot because there's a huge incentive, because when you have that, what economists call the exorbitant privilege, you actually have a lot more room to take on debt that other countries do not have. So, and that debt, to take on that debt is just like too tempting, right? For most politicians to have any kind of fiscal restraint. So it's almost, they often become like sort of a victim of their own success. And then there's just like compounding other issues that will happen along with things like debt, and then like a credit cycle will turn, and that could be the beginning of the end. But I could only really see America not being the dominant hegemon if someone or something else can overturn its dollar rule. And I have heard it's been referred to as the US dollar empire. And that's how they exert their control over the world, is through the currency. It's not through military might, though that is part of it. Military might is a huge
the dollar
component.
allows military might to exist too.
Yes.
Running armies is expensive.
Yeah, but I mean, what America did at the end of World War II was kind of brilliant, right? Like, they made everyone trade oil in US dollars, basically. And so
The birth of
everyone,
the petrodollar.
everyone has to have US dollars, and you don't have a choice. And if you want to actually buy energy for your country, you have to have US dollars. So everyone has to, like, basically the US gets to export its inflation out of its country and import their inflation to so the other countries take the brunt of their inflation. So again, I'm just making the point that it gives you like a lot more room to run
more
debts.
runway.
Yeah,
for sure.
So it's really hard to say, like, where, I mean, no country has ever lasted forever. No state has ever lasted forever. I will say though, like, we've never been as like globalized or interconnected as we are now. Like, it really is crazy. It's even hard to imagine. I know there's like always a lot of hysteria about like maybe there'll be a war between China and America at some point in the future, but it's still hard to imagine. If you look at how interconnected those two economies are, it's hard to imagine them going to war.
Yeah, there's certainly complicating factors.
Yeah.
I don't like to say anything's impossible, because you really look like
the
idiot in the room when
You
the
can't.
most unlikely scenario does actually play out.
Yeah.
But is it also as likely as, war hawks and things might be saying? What are those countries really able to do for warfare? Like, could either country survive a peer-to-peer war of that scale? Who knows? Is World War III imminent, or are we farther away than we've been in a while? There's so many factors at play. I'm hesitant. We could be here for another 2 hours talking about all the minutia.
Totally.
But it isn't to say those aren't good conversations to have. I just think they make it infinitely complex to make predictions.
Yeah.
Not to say I don't have my predictions, but I don't have the time to lay them all out and the reasons why.
Yeah, well, it kind of makes me think about, like, in the Star Wars universe, when, for example, like hyperdrive technology is developed. That's almost like similar to mass flight or commercial flight, where you can, like, all of a sudden, what took weeks to transport people or items is now in a day or less.
I would say it's going from years to hours, almost like when traversing the ocean with like old sail ships took.
Well, yeah, but like
months.
They had like coal powered cargo ships by that
Sure.
time.
Yeah,
So,
it's not as extreme a difference, but the point is, like, interstellar travel goes from generational ships and years to faster than light.
Yeah, totally.
which really changes the dynamic and makes the galaxy much more interconnected, kind of like what you're saying with our globalized world today being so interconnected compared to the Bronze Age of human history, right?
Yeah.
You can have a regional collapse without destroying the entire planet's human population.
Yeah, that's right. And like we were even, referencing like the Napoleonic Wars. I mean, yeah, they very regionally they were devastating, but they didn't collapse the world economy.
Yeah. There was no world economy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A war between China and America would collapse the world economy,
Yes.
right?
And be devastating probably almost everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like no one would
not
safe
feel
from the
something.
effects. Whereas like, yeah, in the Napoleonic Wars, like I don't like maybe fewer spices were bought off the Silk Road and China hurt a little bit, but like, I don't know. I feel like the effects are just far more subtle than they would be now if there was some kind of conflict like that. It's hard to imagine that it wouldn't be a lot more devastating.
And yet the Clone Wars still came. So
Yeah.
are we on the eve of something worse? It also adds weight to the Clone Wars, I think, when you have this 1,000-year era of peace, when this is all anyone has known. You have generations that grow up in this golden age and aren't used to hardship, and then it makes the Clone Wars much more devastating when you have all this context. Like, yeah, you just shattered like 1,000-year golden age.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's like pretty jarring.
Yeah, exactly. And all those people on those planets never would have thought that war would reach their shores, and boom, their planets ignited in the midst of this huge conflict. And that's the thing that always scares me, is this feeling of invulnerability when you're in that golden age, that, oh, that just happens elsewhere and never here. And then suddenly it's here.
Yeah.
Kind of going back to this whole era to just from an out of universe context, I do think it would have been a really fertile area for the Legends universe to be explored and continued with. We do have things like projects in the canon universe, like the High Republic takes place during this era.
Yeah.
Which I've said in the past, I like conceptually some of the things. The whole operation is a huge mess. I quite despise the actual practical execution of what they did with the High Republic. But I think it's an era that could have been well explored, and it gives a bunch of interesting restrictions. You can't really use the Sith as major antagonists because they're supposed to be completely underground. But you can lean into things like natural disasters or smaller scale conflicts or the crime and piracy elements of Star Wars. There's a lot more you could have explored than just Jedi versus Sith elements.
Yeah, you could like really shrink the world a little bit, rather than just these massive galaxy spanning,
or have different kinds of crises, right? Like you could have a galactic scale, like natural event occur.
Yeah,
or like
we were talking like a supernova, a star goes supernova, and it like causes like massive disruptions across the galaxy,
or a massive pandemic. That's another like. The Black Death was absolutely like left its mark in history. Like you could have a galactic scale event like that just can be the crisis of their time, and you could really tell a lot of interesting and unique stories in that kind of setting. And who knows, maybe the Sith were the ones that unleashed the plague behind the scenes, right? Like there's a lot of interesting dynamics that I think are just really missed out on this whole era. One interesting question from this though is, do you think the Sith really went underground immediately at the beginning of this era? Do you think they certainly, like Palpatine by the end of it, is 100% controlling the situation. He's manipulating the events that would lead to the Clone Wars. But do you think this was like an inevitable fall of the Republic? Because there's also all this talk of this like corruption that the Republic goes through, and like it's tightening bureaucracy and like inefficiencies. Would it have killed itself eventually too? And I wonder, kind of related to our Pax Americana question, is like the death of an empire also self-inflicted? And would something like the Clone Wars have been an inevitability, maybe staved off into the future just naturally without the Sith manipulating events? Or did the Sith cause, which came first, right? Chicken or the egg? Or did the Sith just seize on an opportunity? They saw a weakened Republic and thought, now is the time to strike.
Yeah, I mean, my personal philosophy about history is like nothing is inevitable. I know some people think there's like this just sort of long arc of history and there's kind of nothing you could do about it. But even like the Soviet Union, for example, one of the reasons why it fell was just mid-level, like I don't know what their ranks would have been in the Soviet Union, but like colonel types just decided to refuse to follow orders, like shooting order, like to massacre dissidents, and they just refused to follow orders. And then basically once the party brass knew that the military no longer supported them, it was over.
Yeah.
And they could have made a different decision. And it sometimes it just comes down to those decisions, and we could still have the Soviet Union today for all we know, like with a very poor economy, struggling along as it might have. But I think those things, they can happen.
And even changes even at the policy level. You have somewhere like China who's been able to adapt and change in order to survive versus the Soviet Union, which is kind of locked in its ways, that these millions of decisions kind of lead to outcomes, but those decisions are happening all the time and you can change your fate at any point on that trajectory.
Yeah, now it does seem like I can see there's like another side of it too, where there's certain institutional inertia inside of massive and old organizations where it just looks like a freight train that you can't really slow down or change. And there's just certain policies that like it's not, you can't just elect one chancellor and who is going to be a reformer. It's like, this is going to have to be something that changes over the course of generations, literally, in order to like actually change the course of something. Because I think certain policies and ways of thinking just get so ingrained that they get very difficult to dislodge. And so like, there is something kind of like an inevitability, again, until other people just decide to no longer participate in that anymore.
I will also counter with the whole, and I'm not necessarily saying I agree with this, but the general argument of like the great men of history as well. Like, you do have change makers and you do have disruptors that come in as like freight trains of their own, and kind of like smash the institutions or smash the way things have always been done. And sometimes it's an external force, like it's a leader rising amongst the people, or it's an external force, like an invader or a conqueror coming in and bringing their own way of doing things that just completely rewrites or overrides what was there. Now this isn't always the case, and it would be pretty rare, but arguably it has happened. And then there's a counter argument to that, which is like, obviously those leaders didn't just appear out of nowhere. They also had this build up over their own
they
histories.
seem to come like in a crisis moment. Even like, again, referencing Napoleon, he was similarly kind of came in like the crisis of the French Revolution, right? Like that's kind of the milieu in which he came, and he sort of consolidated power when it was like a lot of chaos in France, and like had a crazy army like at that point in time was one of the most powerful armies ever. And and you think, like guys like Winston Churchill or even Hitler, like they sort of rose to the moment, like in a point of crisis. Like, would they, if there wasn't that crisis, would we remember their names, right?
Yeah, would they have been able to do that? And that's what I'm kind of saying with Palpatine, right? Like, did he see something that was already there and he's like, now's the time, I'm going to make my move? And had it gone sideways, because you got to think, like, he was banking on undercutting Chancellor Valorum to take control of the Republic. And had that failed as a gambit, would he just have to sit back and wait for the next crisis to seize on, like another 10 years, another 15 years? Would someone else, like his apprentice, one day overthrow him before he gets the chance to try that again? Could the Republic have survived another 150 years before another Sith Lord found that crisis point to try and seize?
I think there's always a chance that somebody breaks through and causes a massive paradigm shift like that.
Yeah.
There's always a chance. Probably every waking moment we have, there's like a chance that some person alters the course of history by a few decisions that they make.
Yeah.
And probably most of the times they're unsuccessful, but eventually someone is going to be successful, right? And
a match does light the tinder, and
eventually, over given enough time.
But again, the argument being that like sometimes these things are also kind of astroturf. So like Alexander the Great is another example. You could argue it came out of nowhere and blah blah blah. Macedon, this backwater of Greece. But counter to that is like, well, he was a son of a king, and he had like Plato as his like tutor when he was a child. Like he had a lot of things going for him. He had this whole cultural apparatus that his dad built that he was able to utilize. And yes, he maximized to his own ends. But, you know, same thing with any kind of political movement. Like there've probably been decades of tensions brewing before that person or that moment comes. So you only remember that one flashpoint in history, but people tend to forget that like long undercurrent that built to that point, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
They have a whole political movement behind them before their sudden rise to power that seemingly came out of nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nothing exists in a vacuum. There's always like a context and a setup for it, and I think they do a good job in Star Wars with like Palpatine coming and dissolving the Republic and forming the Empire.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it's plausible. Like that's how it could happen.
It is, it's crazy how much things change and how much things stay the same, right? Like it's like, man, something just they don't ever seem to change, and then sometimes things just like it's like, wow, we're living in a completely different world now.
Suddenly a global leader is kidnapped overnight. Your country is completely different.
Exactly. Like in some ways that even like we're going to talk about the Trump Maduro, like picking up Maduro in the way that he did was kind of stunning, and I think was like a shot across the bow to the rest of the world about how things are going to be done now, right? There was also other things that are less known publicly, like after it was like 6 months or so after Russia invaded Ukraine, America seized all Russia's U.S. treasuries and cut them out of SWIFT. Now, for the normie person, they might not think that's a big deal, but that was actually like completely unprecedented. And you can actually, if you go look at the price of gold since that moment. Gold was like plateaued right up until there, and then you just see
suddenly explodes.
Suddenly you see the price of gold ever since that happened. It's like triple the price almost what it was back then. So I think and that has a huge effect because that was like basically a signal to the rest of the world, well, we can't trust the US dollar, so we have to like divest. Now like the world is still heavily has US dollars, but
they're investing in other things too.
Yeah, obviously there's like
they need an insurance policy.
Exactly. And that to me, that was like 100% related with America's decision to seize Russian treasury assets, because all the other countries saw that, like India and China.
That can happen to you too.
Brazil. And they're like, oh, well, we got to do that. Then we better start stocking up on gold, right? Just in case our treasuries get seized.
And you have the birth of BRICS and like it's
exactly.
And then all these cascading effects that come from it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just one decision. And America could have made a different, they could have just not done that. And probably gold would be under $2,000 an ounce today, right? If they didn't. So, I don't know. There's
history is complex. There's lots of factors that lead to different things. And I'm glad Star Wars captures at least a fraction of that complexity.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think with that, we'll probably sign off here. But thanks again for listening. Don't forget to reach out to us, Instagram, X, Facebook, Discord as well. Email is starlorspodcast@gmail.com. We hope to hear from you guys soon. We'll see you later.